Good afternoon, and welcome to our final Wellbeing in the Law Week webinar from New Jersey Lawyers Assistance Program. I'm Noreen, Braman, Strategic Communications Manager for the New Jersey Lawyers Assistance Program, and I welcome you to this final webinar. However, NJLAP is really all about lawyer well-being all year round, and you can check out our services at www.njlap.org. Today, we have a wonderful group of speakers who will address emotional well-being. Too often, we think of the word emotional as a negative, referring only to distressed feelings. However, emotions are also joy, happiness, contentment, and love. I have a special interest in laughter and the rush of emotion that comes with it. It's so powerful that both sides of your brain are occupied, and that can help push stress and worry out of the way. It helps build your resilience for when life is not so much fun. Sara Ellis is a former litigator, future therapist, mental health advocate, and board member of the Lawyers with Depression Project. Joe Milowic III is the Director of Wellbeing and of Counsel at Quinn, Emanuel, Urquhart, and Sullivan, LLP. And he is co-founder of the Lawyers with Depression Project. So welcome to our speakers. This should be a fun and informative program. And up first is Joe. I turn the microphone over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Noreen. I really hope that we got the recording of your introductory remarks, because I think those were great and really important in talking about emotional well-being and the importance of emotions like joy and peace and love. And I think that that's what it's all about, really, is trying to prioritize our peace of mind, our joy, and trying to listen to our hearts more. And I think that'll cure much of what ails us. So I think I'll just mention the Lawyers Depression Project, which is the organization that Sara and I are involved in. It's a peer support community of over 1,000 legal professionals around the world. And that's my dog right on cue. I don't know if you could hear him, but he's a big fan of Lawyers Depression Project. Every time I mention it, he goes nuts. But we are not just lawyers within the group. It's for anyone in the legal profession, and it's not just related to depression. It's anyone who could use a peer support group. So it's a totally bad name. Lawyers Depression Project should be a legal professionals peer support program. So if you know anyone who could use support, our website is lawyersdepressionproject.org, and we host meetings twice a week, 2 to 3 times a week, and basically just come and share what we're going through, connect, and support each other. So it's a really nice place to share our feelings and our emotions. I think what I'm going to share today is just briefly my experience with depression and my journey a little bit, and then a little bit of some self-care tips that I have found particularly helpful for me. So just very briefly on my story, I had experienced depression as a young associate a long time ago now. So it was like 20 years ago. And I was doing fine in my job as an associate, but I started to wake up feeling unrested and start to dwell on my thoughts and start to think that maybe my job was not meaningful and not fulfilling, and therefore might be making me feel sick. So I started to think like, okay, this job is kind of meaningless. It's kind of pointless. And then I started thinking, well, everything seems meaningless and pointless. So for a while, I had no idea what I was going through. I was just convincing myself that everything was meaningless and pointless, and was feeling very sick about that. And ultimately went to my doctor, complained about exhaustion, and we couldn't figure out what was going on. I ultimately decided I was going to leave my job as a big law patent litigator at the time, and I reached out to my diabetes specialist, who they had diagnosed me with pre-diabetes, which turned out not to be right. But I went to the diabetes specialist and I said, I'm going to leave my job tomorrow because it seems meaningless and pointless, and it's making me sick. And so he wrote back right away and said, you need to come in and see a psychiatrist. And so that was a nice turning point for me. I had no idea what depression was about or what psychiatrists were about. So I went in, I met with a psychiatrist, and he quickly went through the list of checked off the box on most of the symptoms of major depression. You know, I was dwelling and ruminating on my thoughts. I was losing weight. I was thinking everything was meaningless and pointless. I was irritated. I was ruminating. I was losing focus. All symptoms of depression, and I had them for months. And so they gave me Lexapro, an antidepressant, and that seemed to work for me. So for like the next decade or so, within a couple of weeks, I started feeling better. But for like the next decade or so, I was super productive at work. I felt like Lexapro was my secret weapon. It was making me like feel super smart. And I did a fine job at work, and moved up to New York and made partner at a big firm, and seemed to be okay for a long time. I would go through periods where I was highly productive, and then I would have like a week or so where I would feel like not motivated and like go through like a rut or a down cycle where I would feel like not really interested in things, and I would wrestle with like, what's the point of things, and what's the meaning? Am I fulfilled by this job? So I'd always have like these existential questions. And then I got to the point again of having another bout of major depression, and I decided, okay, I don't want to be a big law partner litigator. I'm going to leave this job. So before I did that, I went and saw a therapist for the first time, and that was a great experience. My therapist was in Brooklyn, named Colin Jamron. Great guy. He's now on the board of our nonprofit, Lawyers Depression Project. And he was tremendously helpful in helping me realize that, the ways that I tended to think were leading to my down moods. So like cognitive distortions, like I would tend to think of, I should be doing this, I should be doing that. And because I wasn't doing those things, it would set up a conflict in my mind that would make me kind of upset. So like I just learned all about different techniques for basically finding peace of mind, and that's been tremendously helpful. And then along the way, I guess I disclosed to the bar, to everyone in an article, that I had this experience with depression, and that if you're dealing with a mental health issue, you're not alone. They're treatable. Most people do recover from mental health issues. You can still do well in your job, even if you have a mental health issue. And received a great response from the bar, where a lot of people reached out and said, I've been going through this, or I've had a loved one, family member deal with a mental health issue. And so we decided to start a peer support group. And this was back in 2018 or 2019. And we decided to do an online thing, and it's now grown into this international project where we have more than 1,000 legal professionals around the world that come together to support each other. And it's really a beautiful thing. That's where I met Sara. And I think that's basically my share for the day. I want to briefly touch on self-care, because when I think of self-care, I think of, like getting good sleep, eating like healthy foods, whole foods, getting some exercise in, stuff like that is I think basic self-care that's really important. But I also think of this some different things as self-care, and I wanted to just touch on them. So one being prioritizing yourself and loving yourself, and trying to like let go of the inner critic. So the thoughts in your mind that like, oh, you're not good enough, just observing those thoughts and letting them go, and realizing that you are good enough just as you are, and realizing that you don't need to sacrifice yourself. You don't need to sacrifice your health. So make sure that you prioritize your health and take care of yourself, and just be compassionate to yourself. The other thing is just, it's kind of cliche, but the statement, you're perfect just the way you are. I think that is actually true, that we all have a unique path, and that there's no need to compare ourselves to others. We don't know each other's stories. You don't know what someone's going through, but each of us are on our own journey, and we're good enough just as we are. The other thing is listening to your heart. I think that is really important to know that you have all the answers within you, within your heart, and that, oh, I'm wearing the shirt, be the change that you want to see in the world, which is really cool, because it's one of the things I wanted to mention. You know, in every moment we have a decision we can make. We can choose love or fear as our guide, and I think that following your heart and doing what you value is a positive way to change the world. And then just two other quick things, and I'll turn it over to the next speaker, is that forgiveness can be very healing. So giving up attack thoughts and letting go of fears. And lastly is being here now. So being in this moment, observing with an open and curious mind, and letting miracles unfold, rather than being judgmental and collapsing the wave function of potentialities. Just be here now with an open mind, and let love unfold. So thanks. Gonna turn over to the next speaker. Great to be here.
Thanks so much, Joe. So this is the issue with going second. You already put everything so eloquently. I'm trying to think how I can add to the conversation. But just to, I guess, start from the beginning for me, my name is James Lewis. I'm the Chief Diversity Officer for Schotz, and I'm the President-elect for the Garden State Bar Association, which is the largest and oldest bar association for African-American lawyers, judges, and law students in New Jersey. So with that, obviously, as you can imagine, there's quite a bit of responsibility that comes with both of those spaces. So one piece of what Joe shared that I think resonated with me and kind of dovetails into what I'm hoping to share with you folks is this notion of just being true to yourself. I think that's really the center mass for me, right? Because I've been fortunate to like win awards and you win cases, but sometimes when you feel like you're getting outside of yourself in order to get those wins, it doesn't really resonate the same way. Whereas when you feel like you're being centered in who and what you are, even small successes can feel quite big. And so I think that's kind of been my North Star in my practice, and certainly in the information share that we do in the spaces that I occupy. I think takes a lot of names, right? Right now, I think in the DEI space, we hear a lot of conversation around like being your authentic self, right? And that can be small decisions. Like today, I was like, oh, I'm going to be in front of some folks I don't know, and I put on a suit jacket. It's the first time I put on a suit jacket on a Zoom call in quite some time because I love you guys that much. But like just the way you choose to present. But I did add a pop of color, no white or blue shirt today. And I think those are the kinds of decisions that sometimes on a daily basis, we're getting either farther away from who we are or closer to who we are. And so I just try to bring people back to how are we making those decisions? Are we being true to ourselves? Are we being honest with ourselves about where we want to be and what we're enjoying? So that's kind of what my focus has been, and kind of creating spaces for conversations like this, frankly, particularly in communities where there's oftentimes a lot of shame around struggle, a lot of shame of even admitting that you have difficulty or need help in like a general sense, right? I think I remember when I came out of law school and I felt like I know law, And then, I was a law clerk and I was like, I don't know much. And so I think it's getting that comfort level with being able to seek help when needed. That's always been important to me, as an emotional benefit, but also as a professional benefit as well, because it's easy to get stuck in sort of like these loops of not knowing and kind of running into a wall and then running back and against the wall again. So that's what I typically use as my North Star. Joe mentioned some of the basics, so I'm going to reiterate some of the ones that have been important for me. Certainly meditation and yoga are two practices that I find useful. And I know sometimes with lawyers, when I say the word meditation or yoga, they kind of look at me like I'm hugging a tree. But for me, the real practical benefit of it that I felt immediately was the expansion of response time. Because I felt like there were so many different spaces where I was reacting and it almost felt like thoughtless, like something was happening and this is my response and that's the correct response because it's the one I chose. But I felt that the deeper I got into my yoga and my meditation practice, this isn't a reaction, it's a choice. And I may have 7 or 8 choices to choose from here. And I can think through the potential consequences for each one. And I think that made me a better partner for my spouse, certainly a better parent. I think it made me better in my practice too, right? Because you get a nasty gram from your adversary at 7 o'clock in the morning, you're pre-caffeinated, and it's easy to say, I got one for you too, right? But then, it helps you explore what the different options are, think through maybe what's going on, maybe they're pre-caffeinated too, and just offer some grace where maybe I wouldn't have otherwise. So I think that was sort of the central and like immediate value set that I got from the meditation, when I was like, wow, I'm not responding in like 2 seconds flat now. I could take a whole, 10 seconds now and be thoughtful about a response. And I think that was super useful for me. So big advocate for meditation and yoga. And the cheat code for me, because I know like the being silent with your thoughts was like a real challenge for me. But I just found like whatever little bit of time I had, I would find a meditation like on Spotify, and just do like 9-10 minutes of just breathing. And I think that helped me kind of refocus myself in a way that was advantageous. And my kids would be listening to it too. So while they would never actively engage with me if I asked them to do it, I found that they were reaping the benefit of the practice also. And it just kind of brought us all to a better start. One that I was big on, I've kind of fallen away from, if I'm being completely candid with you, is journaling. Just kind of what my high points for the day was when I feel my best. I find as lawyers, we like lists, right? And we like action items. So when I started being intentional about, well, when did I feel my best today? Was it while I was walking? Was it when I actually was like being conscientious about how much water I was drinking? Like, what are the things that I can be sensitive to and kind of track, and then make sure that I'm aligning myself to my own best practices, I think is useful, right? Because we do that in our professional lives, but I think as it relates to our emotional well-being, sometimes we don't put in that like core work, that pre-work to kind of think through, what is it that I can be doing that I can arrive my best? But if not, then it kind of falls to, again, being reactionary, which means like, I got 10 minutes to eat. So I'm like flying to a fast food place, and I'm picking the worst possible option on the menu. And so those sorts of things are not really conscientious choices. Sometimes it's because we feel like there's a lack of time. So this, again, kind of just helped me expand my own thinking. This next one is the most radical one for me, candidly. It's rest, right? I think within the profession, you're billing your time has value, time is money. So rest feels like super radical. It's like, wow, I'm going to take 30 minutes and watch a TV show. Ooh, right? So, but being able to budget it, I think, was something that was important for me, because if not, I found that I wasn't doing it. And then I was falling victim to like binge watching something, right? Now I'm tired the next day, and it's just not, it doesn't have the same level of just, I think, intentionality that I think would be useful for me. So rest is something that I advocate for. And rest can take like a lot of different, I think, ways. So I think you have to find kind of which lane works best for you. I think, the staycations are a beautiful and awesome thing. Like if you can get like a Friday and then a Saturday, Sunday, pile of 3 and just kind of sit with yourself, maybe cook for yourself, do those types of self-care things. I think it can be useful. And so those are the pieces that I kind of think through there. The next one, I've never used this language before, but I think it's cool, so I'm going to share it with you. It's like creating a self-charter. Like, what can I hold myself accountable to doing for myself? And so I start like super light, right? So like I said, I'll do like an 8-minute Spotify meditation. I know that I can I can get up 8 minutes earlier without it feeling like a painstaking enterprise. So that's kind of like what limited commitments can I put in here? And then when you do them and you kind of reap the reward for it, it makes it easier to double down on it. Sometimes I think to myself, like, when's the last time I drank water? I can't remember. And I know I need to like do something about that. And for a while, I used to wear like the Fitbit watches or the devices that tell you like track. And yeah, there we go. And I had a falling out with mine because it was like, when's the last time you stood up? And I was like, you're judging me. I don't appreciate this judgment. I haven't stood up in a long time. but those types of things too, just I think create an additional layer of just accountability without it necessarily being critical. Because like I just have a better sense of where I stand in my day. Another one that Joe touched on, but he didn't use this language, but it's the language I typically use, just community, right? I think finding yourself in community, information sharing, knowing that you're not alone in some of these enterprises provides such a reassurance sometimes, like, hey, I'm going through this. And then someone else is going through something similar, or you can borrow ideas from what they've been through, or you can actually be a benefit to someone else. Cause like, hey, I went through this. Let me show you what I did. And I think that type of community is something that's so important and useful, particularly as lawyers. Cause I think there's sort of like this rugged mentality to lawyering, like, oh, I'm going to get to the top of the mountaintop. And oftentimes there might be like another path that's a little bit easier, or there might be a carved road already that's there. And so sometimes I think it may be doing yourself a disservice to operate outside of community. So where available, I think it's so good to kind of cross pollinate in different communities to make sure that you're doing yourself the best interest that you can, but you're also information sharing from the knowledge that you have. This one's also a big one for me, and I'm still working on this one, is resisting the urge to unnecessarily multitask, right? I think I will not disclose how many tabs I have open on my screen right now, but it's a lot, right? and I found that when I could focus in on one thing at a time, I was better able to perform that one thing. And so I could then turn my attention to the next thing in a way that was useful. And so I started implementing that like just in my parenting, like, because nothing's worse than like your kid tells you a story, you've got your device in your hand and you missed a part of the story and you're asking them now to go back, and you could see sort of like the dejection that comes from that. And so, and it's preventable, right? Like, and again, my kids are 6 and 9, so I'm only cool for about 10 to 15 minutes before they're over me, right? So I'm like, I want to take advantage of those 10 to 15 minutes. I don't want you to feel like you're competing for my time. So let me do this with you and then move on. And so kind of being intentional about engaging fully in whatever is right before me, I think has been critical for me. And I think my own successes in these spaces. So those are the high level shares that I have. I think for me, like what we discussed ahead of this conversation was like when you feel like you're being successful, you have all the sort of outer accoutrements of success, right? Like the partnership at the firm, you're winning this award, you just hit one on this big trial, but doesn't really necessarily align with the feeling. I think that was kind of one of the red flags for me that I had to make some adjustments, right? Because I did the thing I set out to do and I don't feel the way that I set out to feel. So kind of tinkering with my own thinking and thinking about my thinking, I think was useful for me, just to step back and find that, I may enjoy this 10-minute, that might be the highlight of my day, is a 10-minute walk when it's not pouring rain outside, right? Because who knows what this weather is doing, but finding that clip of time just to be with myself, I think was useful. So again, I want to thank Joe for his sentiments and what he shared here, and kind of echo some of the same, with an additional appreciation that sometimes, things later on. I think as lawyers, like when people ask, what do you do? Or what is, I am a lawyer, like that becomes like a very definitive thing. But recognizing that that's like one point of who you are, right? There's so many other things beyond that. And so I think honoring the complexity of being an individual, particularly today, I think gives me a lot of grace for myself that maybe I wasn't giving myself before, right? Because if you think of yourself exclusively as just a lawyer, it's like you're also a human being and you need these things to run effectively. So I think taking the time to honor our own humanity is something that is important to me. And so with that, I can pass things on to the next speaker.
Thank you, James and Joe. I don't even know if I have anything left to say because you guys spoke so well and so completely about everything and so beautifully openly about your own experiences. And James, I love that your kids are getting mindfulness training through osmosis of you modeling it for them. I mean, that is going to serve them so hugely later in life. I just love, of all the people I've talked to about mindfulness, I've not heard someone mention that before. And I just think that's just the coolest thing I've heard all week. So I'm Sara. I'm a former litigator. I did intellectual property and entertainment litigation. I did things like the Blurred Lines trial and largely music litigation in Nashville until I got to the point where I realized that the only thing I liked about law was the subject matter of it. I didn't like the pressures of it. They were not a good fit for me. I also made the mistake of working for a very toxic firm at the beginning of my career. That made things very difficult. And so I had the typical, 80 hours a week, 7 days a week, on call 24/7 type lifestyle. And that really weighed on me for a long time. And then I eventually, after a few years, changed firms, but for some reason, I carried all the weight and the stress and everything with me. And it wasn't until I was in a different environment, but was still carrying all the pressure, all the judgment, all the constant worrying with me that I realized that this might not be the right fit for me. I've always had an interest in mental health. And at the encouragement of my friends and my husband, I decided to make a change and begin a career as a therapist. So for the last 2 years, I've been studying, getting my master's in social work, which has been eye-opening for me. I'm now days away from graduation, which is just wild to think about because after finishing law school, I thought that I would never need or want school again. But it's taught me a lot of lessons, and even learning them, it's taken me years to really process a lot of the things that James was talking about with mindfulness. I can really speak to how life-changing it has been for me to not just the meditation. I'm not good at meditation, but becoming more mindful of what I'm experiencing in the moment of, this is a moment of stress. It will pass. This is a moment of grief. And, it's okay to feel grief. This is a moment of sadness, and it's okay to feel sadness and to deal with it appropriately in the moment. That is definitely something that I've had to learn. And I believe that working through feeling those emotions, like Noreen mentioned at the beginning, is something that takes practice and work. As for meditation, when I first started my program, we would do things like sitting in sharing circles. And I was just like, coming from the lawyer background, I'm like, what is this crap? This is the stupidest thing I have ever heard of. Why are we doing this? This is such a waste of time. But after 2 years and working with clients and working in a therapeutic setting, I've actually really come to appreciate the value of the sharing and working on learning meditation through different ways, such as I personally do walking meditations. Sitting there and trying to clear my mind, it's not going to happen. I have way too many things going on that I cannot turn off. But walking every day has been really beneficial for me. And I've actually seen a drop in my actual heart rate. I was looking at my health data on my phone the other day, and since I've started walking, my resting heart rate has dropped to 7 beats per minute. And that was shocking to me because I was not really expecting any sort of response. Like I wasn't even looking for any sort of response like that, but to see such an immediate effect of just going for walking, honestly, for the last 2 weeks or so, I'm already seeing like the health effects, the calming effects. And so I want to encourage people to find what works for them, because after 2 years of trying countless meditations and mindfulness activities that just really, might be relaxing for a moment, but don't really work for me. Finding walking is something that I've really enjoyed and come to love. And so I think that's kind of a symbol of my perspective on things, is to find the things that work for you, find the things that help have your mind at rest, have your body at rest, and allow you to focus on yourself in a way that lawyers don't tend to do very well. We're always on the go. We're always trying to meet the next objective. We're always trying to meet the next thing on our list to accomplish. But we really should focus as much as we can on ourselves in whatever way that we can achieve that. And with that little bit of rambling, I'll turn it back to Noreen, because I know she has some Q&As for us.
Thank you so much. I really want to thank you for coming to this webinar to talk about this issue, because it is really so important. And one of the things that is really the basic for everyone, before you can even start about thinking about emotional well-being or physical well-being and all that, is being present in the moment. And Sara, you mentioned that for a little bit. And I would just like to take a little bit of a few minutes here to actually do a little exercise to help you understand what it means to be present in the moment. Because the truth is, most of us are living where we were before we got to this webinar, and what we were doing and maybe what's unfinished, and where we have to be when this webinar is done. And that is not living in the present moment. So if I could ask you to close your eyes for a few minutes, and we're going to take a deep breath in and out. And I just want you to think, without opening your eyes, about the room that you are in right now. Your feet are on the floor. You're sitting in a chair of some kind. You're wearing clothes that you put on maybe this morning. And just think about those things as being the only things that are present in the world right now. What's in this room? And take a breath in and out. And I'm going to ask you a few questions that you can answer aloud because everyone is muted. Keep your eyes closed. And these are questions not about me, but about yourself. When I say, what color are my shoes today? Not mine, but yours. Think about that. No peeking. What color is my shirt or part of my clothing that covers the upper half of my body? In this room, is there something that you particularly like? Without looking around, does something come to mind that you like particularly in the room where you are right now? And then, is there something in the room where you are which is troublesome to you? A reminder of something, or a messy corner, or something like that. And take that and think about that. Now let's take a deep breath in and out. And I'll give you one humorous thing to think about without opening your eyes. What color is my hair? And I mean myself, Noreen. And you could open your eyes to that. Hopefully that little bit of centering yourself in the room, even if you're in your kitchen, there are things that you no longer notice every day. And now if you just look around, you're going to see things that, oh, I like that. Oh, I like that. I forgot I like that. This helps you to be present. And before you do anything, even if you're ready to go to court, you're in your office, if you can take 3 deep breaths, center yourself on the chair that you're sitting in, just saying, this is all that exists for me right now. Doesn't matter if you have thoughts, you don't have to push them away, but you just think about the room that you're in, and it gets you ready to be for your next kind of activity. And one of the questions I have that I would like to ask our panel is, and I think James and Sarah and Joe did a pretty nice job of talking about their habits that they are using to help lower their stress levels and control their emotional reactions. But what I'd like to ask you right now is about the emotions that we sometimes take for granted. What brings you joy? Think about that for a moment and let's discuss what brings us joy. That's an emotion that is very powerful, helps our brain a lot to release endorphins and serotonin and all those kinds of things. So, James, how about you? What brings you joy?
Yeah, I think it was touched on, but I'm a new suburbanite. So I grew up in Jersey City, New Jersey. And so it's just outside New York. But we recently moved to West Orange. And so I have the opportunity now, I think, to spend much more time with nature. So one of my highlights of the day is walking my children to school. And so I think just taking that moment is definitely important to me. Because of the breathing, I think is important to me, because of the refreshing, because of the kind of like start of my day and kind of getting the blank slate that's associated with it is important to me, because it's not, I think, as was touched upon too, we often kind of operate from a list of to-dos, and that list sometimes can feel all-consuming. So I think stepping away and just having a moment of gratitude to kind of hold space, to be one with the environment is important to me.
Sarah, how about you?
I think spending time with my dogs and spending time with my husband is a big part of what brings me joy. The dogs are just boundless love and energy, and they're pretty cute too. I just enjoy the companionship that comes with spending time with my husband in the evenings and on the weekends, and just existing and having time to relax together. That really just brings me joy. Or even just the simple act of running errands. And I think part of that is because when I was practicing, when I was working, when I was studying all the time, I didn't have time for those simple things. And now those simple things have so much more value to me than they did before. Whereas to find joy previously, it would have to be something like pretty big, like a pretty big, case win, or some sort of special night out. But now I get to have kind of the day-to-day basic joy in life, and it's definitely been significantly more fulfilling.
Thank you. And I know we had lost Joe for a second, but I think he's back. Can you speak to us, Joe?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes. Oh, yes. We forgot you are Sara Ellis #2.
Yes, you can call me Sarah. That's fine. So
Nicole, could you activate his video for him, please?
What brings me joy is, I find whenever I see animals, like the innocence of animals, the innocence of little kids. We live near an elementary school, and the little kids pass by our house every day, back and forth from school, and just seeing the little kids brings me joy. Seeing animals, interacting with animals, and I think spreading love and peace, sharing thoughts about love, peace, God, higher power, truth, all that stuff comes from my heart, where I think joy resides.
Thank you. We do have a question in the Q&As. And first, the person is saying, James, thank you for sharing about your kids. I love the focus on being present with them. I would share that gratitude journaling has proven surprisingly engaging with my 5- and 7-year-olds. It's also a good daily reminder that the best part of the day for which we are most grateful often happens at home. And I'd like to add to this that I am good friends with an editor of a magazine that deals a lot with ecological things. And he has been keeping a gratitude journal for 8 years. And every so often he sits down and he just leafs through that and reads about the absolutely kind of trivial, mundane, and then also really important things that he was grateful for. So I'd like to give each of you a chance to talk about if you have a gratitude practice with a journal, or thinking about 3 things at night that you're grateful for. And we can all understand that maybe there's a day where the only thing we're grateful for is that the day is over. Okay, we have those days. But what are things that you find that you're grateful for, and how do you keep that alive? Good. We'll start, since we started with James first, we'll start with Sara this time.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because I kind of do take miniature snapshots of the day, of to steal from Jon Stewart, you know, my moment of Zen, which usually involves my dogs. But, you know, could be the simple act of, you know, a smiling at a stranger, or something, you know, going particularly well, or, you know, spotting, you know, I'm like Joe, like I love animals. And anytime I see them, you know, walking down the street or going by in a car, like I'm always like smile like a child. And my husband's like, are you ever going to stop calling out all the dogs that you see? I'm like, never. I have to pet all of them. And so like little moments of like that is I keep track. I don't do a journal, but I do kind of, you know, sit there and have a moment of like, okay, this is my moment of the day that really brings me joy, and that I'm going to remember for the day and enjoy this in the moment. Or it could just be like really great ice cream, you know, like it really, you know, it always surprises me of what this moment might be, big or small. But I do find that it's usually the small things that end up standing out to me, the things that only might last a moment, but those moments just kind of fill you with warmth and joy.
So true, so true. How about you, Joe? What do you find you're grateful for?
So it's interesting with the gratitude, because, you know, we tend to end each of our peer support sessions by going around and doing a statement of gratitude from each member. So we leave on a high note. And yesterday we had a little discussion with someone who was on the call about, you know, sometimes gratitude practices don't always feel right for everybody. Like sometimes it doesn't feel genuine, to like, it feels a little forced to go through and say, I'm grateful for, you know, all the things we know we take for granted. I'm grateful that I have a roof over my head. I'm grateful that I have, you know, food and water and family. And then like you go through it all and you're like, and why am I so miserable? And why do I feel so sad? And like, it doesn't make any sense. So I just want to mention that, because it is a strange paradox in a way. Like why is it that, you know, you can have so much privilege, so many benefits, have almost like on paper a perfect life, and feel completely empty and depressed. But but to your question, I do go to bed at night and check in with my higher power and say thanks for moments of peace, lessons that I'm learning. You know, the very difficult parts of the day I see as lessons that I'm here to learn. And there are many, and they are hard. They're very hard sometimes. But I think it's all for us. It's all for love ultimately, even though it's really hard sometimes to make sense of it. But oh yeah, and just on journaling, just very briefly, I have a practice of writing down my fears and limiting beliefs, and then giving those to my higher power to deal with, which is a great thing. I love it. I just give them all away. So I don't have any worries left. I just, anytime I get a worry or a fear, write it down. You can have it. And it helps. It helps a lot.
That's really amazing. And I'm really glad that you've been so honest with us about this, because sometimes people talk about a toxic positivity movement that may be going on around us. And in the reality, gratitude journal and trying to dredge up feelings that are not genuine to you don't do anything for you. So that might not be the thing that helps you be centered and brings you joy and pleasant emotions. And I was so glad that you then came about your journal about how you release all your worries at night, and that brings you joy and peace. So we have lots of choices of things that we can do purposefully to help ourselves feel better, but we need to discover which of those modalities are the one that's right for us. And I'm going to give James a chance to add to his version of this.
Sure. No, so that all resonates with me. So we do a rose and a thorn at dinner time at my house. So everyone has to share what their favorite moment of the day was and maybe what their less optimal moment of the day was. And of course, most days the kids spend way more time on the thorn than the rose, but we bring them back to like, what is it that you appreciated about your day? And oftentimes whatever their rose was kind of usurps my rose, because I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool that you had that experience, whatever. And they're like, oh, I got to wear my favorite sneakers today. I was the fastest person in gym class today. So these very small things through their lens, I think oftentimes helps me, I'll say. And then it also just gets them sharing. And again, I think being community, even at home, is something that's necessary. And then for me, it forces me to think through a positive, and I think that's useful for me as well. And sometimes it can be, it feels very minute when you're sharing it. And then as you start to discuss it, it can kind of blossom sometimes for me. Like one that I've been focused on lately is like my check engine light hasn't come on. And I'm like, all right, this is phenomenal. Just keep cruising. So that's one of those things where, the worry and the anxiety that's kind of wrapped up in that is another way of letting it go, to use Joe's phraseology there. But yeah, I agree with you. I think the danger with some of these like AI spaces and looking for those roots for it, it can kind of feel dismissive to what can be very challenging and real experiences. And so that's why I think it's good to have folks around you who can see you, right? Who can kind of see where you are and what you need in a given moment, because it's certainly not a one size fits all. But I think just being able to kind of communicate around it has been useful for me. Oh, and on the journaling side, so I'm a millennial, so I grew up in the age of Zanga, and sometimes I'll like look at what 16-year-old James was focused on, right? And oftentimes it feels patently ridiculous, right? Because your perspective is like this. It's like the thing that's immediately in front of me is the biggest thing, right? And so sometimes just a reminder that you can zoom out a little bit, and what feels super duper big today may feel less big in an hour or in 2 weeks or in 20 years. And sometimes it just gives additional perspective that I find is also very humbling and embarrassing at times, but all those things are part of the human experience. So
I agree with you so much. I have all my junior high and high school journals in a file cabinet drawer. And sometimes, again, I look at them and it can be very embarrassing when you think of yourself, this was so important, I'm crying over this. But then you realize that, especially if you're in the process now of having children of your own, now it helps you understand why there's so much drama, because there's not a way of balancing what's really important and what's maybe a temporary glitch in the road. And I have to tell you, I sometimes read my journals to my kids. Oh yeah, you think you had a problem? Look at what happened to me in English class. And we would laugh about it, and really we would have a good time about it. And one of the really good things that can help with emotional balance is just talking to each other, with your friends, with your families, and telling those stories that maybe it was something that wasn't funny when it first happened, but upon reframing, it becomes hilarious, especially the more and more you tell it. If really, in the end, no one was really injured or hurt, and no one was insulted or demeaned, you know, boy, I was really upset about this XY thing that happened to me. And you look at, like, you're looking at your journals. Wow, that really wasn't such a big deal at the moment. And we have another question from an attendee here. And I know that all of you spoke about your mindfulness practices. And this person would like to know what your favorite or best practice is for mindfulness. Because I think, James, you did a really good explanation about how a lot of us, we can't clear our mind. We can't spend 4 hours in lotus position. How are other ways that we could be mindful, or do you have any shortcuts? And I'll let James go first, because he really did talk a lot about this, as well as everyone did.
Yeah, so I think my approach has been twofold. I mean, I think this is a space where I think there's a wealth of technology that can be helpful, right? So like I listen to different guided meditations on Spotify or on YouTube, and I'll just kind of just punch in what I'm looking for, right? So like I'm looking to relax, I'm looking to let something go. And frankly, the children's meditations are my favorite. It's like, hey, think of a color that represents the stress that you're experiencing, and just exhale that out, right? And I think, and they're short, and I think that's kind of where I find my strength. And then in terms of just listening to my body is the other one, right? Because it gets louder, right? If you don't pay attention to certain things that are happening in your body, like the issue will get more and more aggressive. So I think like I hold a lot of stress in my shoulders. Frankly, as I'm sitting here, I'm noticing my shoulders are like my ears, right? Those are the types of things that I just try to be more cognizant of, and then respond in kind. So like, let me do a shoulder stretch while I'm seated here. Those types of things just help me pay more attention. But you definitely have to find your lane. There's lots of things I tried that did not work. And so it's kind of a exploration for what works best, and not giving up just because something may not resonate. And like a lot of us, I think it's the overachiever in many attorneys, like we'll go for like the 2-hour meditation or like the 1 week silent retreat right out the gate. And it's like, well, there's ways to kind of ease into the spaces so you can find your own comfort level. So I think, again, starting small is always the best way to go, and then integrating more as you get more comfortable.
Thank you, James. And Sara not only is going to tell us a little bit about mindfulness, but she had some more thoughts on gratitude, and I want to give her the chance to express that.
Yeah, first on the gratitude, one thing that I've used with my clients is kind of related to what James was saying with the rose and the thorn, is what's something that's been going well for you lately, and what's something you're struggling with today. And then using it with my clients to use their strengths and the things that have been going well with them to see if that can help resolve the thing that they're struggling with. Sometimes it can, sometimes it can't, but usually they can find the strengths of what they've been turning to that's been successful to help at least lighten the load of what they're struggling with. And as for mindfulness, I think finding what works for you, right? Because I was saying before, like me sitting there, blank mind, I have too many things racing. If that's how you want to go about it, great, but like give yourself some kindness about these thoughts that are invading. No, like it's called a mindfulness practice for a reason. You have to practice it. Even the monks up on the hill are not having a completely blank mind. It's about taking what you're experiencing in this moment and letting it pass through. But there's all sorts of different ways to practice, mindfulness and meditation. And if some people equate the two of mindfulness being meditation, but for me, mindfulness is just kind of being aware of what you're experiencing. But what you mean is, how to have a meditation practice, explore different things. Is your meditation, or mindfulness, having just a really like hot shower and being left alone for 10 minutes at the end of the night? Is it going for a walk and listening to like one of the many free mindfulness apps that are out there that I have? Like Insight Timer has a great one on it. Is it sitting in a room and practicing and you know, with your thoughts? Is it guided? Is it unguided? Is it accompanied with music? There are so many different ways to go about it, and it really is what works for you. So I guess the best practice to answer that is to try things until you find something that works. I never expected to be the person who goes to the park and walks every morning, like they've got nothing better to do, but that's me now. And I would have laughed in your face if you suggested that to me, you know, even a few months ago. But now I've really come to love it, and it's a great mind clearing activity for me. So I say, try everything, and once you find something, just hold on to it and then continue to practice it.
Joe, how about you?
Thank you. Well said, Sarah. So when I first started getting into meditation, I just loved it. You know, I loved learning about it, and what James mentioned earlier about that space opening up between the thoughts and the reactivity, and finding some space. So like let things arise and just be able to observe them, and then it gives you the ability to choose. And I got really excited about all that as I started to learn the practice of meditation. And I remember having these two landscaper guys were turning our front yard into a pollinator meadow. And so while they were digging up the front yard, I said to him, I said, do you guys meditate? Because I was getting into meditation at the time. And without skipping a beat, as he was hoeing the dirt, he said, this is our meditation. And I was like, that's interesting. And I've since realized, you know, what he was saying. And it goes to what Sarah was saying about mindfulness and just being in the moment, doing something that's bringing you joy. And, you know, like when I do yoga or when I swim, I go swimming and do the breaststroke, I can't really think. I just keep coming up and swim. And in that moment, I'm just there, just swimming and just in the moment. And it's a very joyful process. So I think, you know, meditation, mindfulness, I think they're all really wonderful, and they, in a way, are like a way of mental conditioning or training our minds to be more intentional, to be more cognizant that we're not our thoughts, and that we can be aware of the thoughts that are being generated by the mind and choose the ones that give us, you know, peace and joy. It's really beautiful.
Thank you. There's one last question. I think I'm gonna take it. It says, is it possible that playing some phone app games is a way for mindfulness if it is a way in which one is not thinking about anything else and it is enjoyable? Or is it a way of escaping thoughts and is bad? What I'm gonna say about a phone app, let's not separate a phone app or being on your phone from being too intense about anything. When I was a kid, my mother was always mad at me because she could not get this nose out of that book. And it was because I loved reading so much, but I was ignoring the things that I needed to do. So playing a phone app, if that gives you 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes of clearing your thoughts, relaxation, lowering your heartbeat and your blood pressure, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that as the method that you use to be present in the moment. Again, if your children are looking for dinner or you're supposed to be at work and you're playing your phone app and it makes you late for work and all that, that's no different than any other kind of addictive process. So I hope that helps you a little bit. And this has been a wonderful, wonderful program. I'm so happy that you all came here to talk about this. And I'm going to send you home with, of course, a little laughter exercise. If any of you in the attendee list are from the Attorney General's office, you may remember this. This is how to laugh your way to stress relief without relying on jokes or comedy. You're going to take your hands like this, because this is the way you acupressure people think that this fleshy part of your hands goes directly to your reward center. And we're going to do this. Ho, 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 ha, 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 he. And the very most important thing is to look into your Zoom camera and do this. Whee! And we're going to do that 3 times to get you energized, and I'll send you on your way for a happy weekend. So here we go. Ho, ho, ho. Ha, ha, ha. He. Whee! Ho, ho, ho. Ha, ha, ha. He. Whee! One more time. Ho, ho, ho. Ha, ha, ha. He. Whee! You have now raised your pulse, brought more oxygen into your body, given your brain some endorphins, and hopefully that will help you have the rest of the day good and a good weekend to you. Thank you so much for attending this. It'll be on YouTube sometime over on the weekend in our YouTube channel at youtube.com/NJLAP. Thanks so much again. Take care. Today's speakers are knowledgeable and experienced with all facets of lawyer well-being. James A. Lewis V is inaugural Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at AmLaw 200, law firm Cole Schotz, and is President-elect of the Garde State Bar Association. Sara Ellis is a former litigator, future therapist, mental health advocate, and board member of the Lawyers with Depression Project. Joe Milowic III is the Director of Wellbeing and of Counsel at Quinn, Emanuel, Urquhart, and Sullivan, LLP, and co-founder of the Lawyers with Depression Project. Welcome to our wonderful speakers and to all your attendees. This is going to be a great presentation.